But firstly, we've actually got some internet drama of another kind. Dave Meltzer, quote unquote.
Oh my God.
You you,
Do we have to talk about that sob?
you watch the.
And I say that in the kindest possible terms possible.
Had you heard this before I sent it you?
Oh, I've heard it all my life about things like this. Go ahead.
Okay, so idiot podcasters. And I'm going to quote this verbatim because I always like to do this with Dave Meltzer and Kevin Nash. There are definitely things that you can criticize AEW for. But as far as the value of the business, if you have it, it astounds me because you actually have to, not know anything about television at all or modern television to not see this. And yet people have been doing this thing for years. And, I don't know how many times I've got to tell you, I don't, you guys can all these days. Okay. Just rambling to the madman.
Yeah.
All of these podcast idiots who have been insulting me, Dave Meltzer, for all these years because I'm the one who's been ahead of the curve and you guys are still stuck, on stuff like 1990 or 2000 or whatever it was. And I mean, it's like the one thing you can do, every one of ya, is that Tony Khan is probably not going to announce this thing. This is a new television AEW deal for a couple of weeks. So you can get on board and explain, guess what? I figured this all out before he announces it. And you can you at least can look like you're not completely out of touch, even though you've been out of touch for the last couple of years. So anyway, there's a lot more. It's just that time. It's there. It's time,
Yep. That sounds exactly like him. So, but we do know one thing, that the idiot podcasters, would we be included in that or no?
Are we? Because have we ever... I think this is really what I'm getting at. Have we ever said that AEW isn't going to get a new deal? So I'm pretty sure we never said that.
We did say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we did say they need to change their presentation of their product. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Because they did change the presentation of the product, and we'll talk about that, like I said, later. But I think Dave is getting older now, and he wants to be held in high esteem, and I don't blame him. I will say one thing about him. He is a prolific writer in volume. Like, he just sits down and just goes and goes and goes and goes. He has to, because I don't subscribe to his newsletter, but I remember what it used to look like, because he would have to go and he would type all this stuff up, and he would go with a mimeograph machine. You remember that?
No. Yeah, photocopy of that kind of affair.
Well, he went with a mimeograph machine, which is back in the 70s, and he would go, I guess, page by page by page, and he'd print whatever copies he had. Then he would hand staple them together and then mail it, which was a lot of work. It really was. But somehow he became the de facto expert on pro wrestling. And then, of course, they had what were some of the other newsletters, old time newsletters that followed him?
Really, there's only Pro Wrestling Torch, I think, at the time was the only real competition for him, in the 80s and 90s.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was the Observer and the Torch. But a lot of, he became like even more than the Torch. The Observer became the de facto expert in pro wrestling. And I remember a lot of the guys used to read it. I never would read it. I mean, I would read like different copies of it, but as far as being a regular fan of it, I mean, I was thinking, even back in those days, how in the hell does he know? But then I found out later how he knew more than I did, is because the guys that were actively working in the ring every night, they would call him up and, of course, give him stories that made them look better, not only to fans, but to promoters, basically. I used to know Bruiser Brody would do it. And he would throw a number out say you had New Japan and Old Japan, whatever they were back in those days. But he said New Japan has offered him this much money a week. Well, Old Japan would read that and take it as truth. And then that's the way he kept his negotiations going in Japan. And I can see doing that. And they were a lot of Paul Heyman was a regular reader, plus a regular talker to Meltzer on the phone. Eddie Gilbert was another one. Jim Ross was another one. And, and it goes on and on and on. I would like to say that I was a regular talker to him, except he wouldn't take my.
Hey, that 0900 line or 1900 line is pretty expensive.
Yeah. Hey, I had a 900 line one time.
What?
Guess how much? Oh, I did years ago with WCW. And I think it was, that's when Lance Russell was there. And he wanted me to have a 900 line to where I would report news to fans. And it didn't work very well. That 900 line went out of, it was expensive as hell. It was like $1.50 a minute or $1 a minute. And you better be putting out $1 a minute back in those days was very expensive. It's like $5 a minute now. And how long would you listen to somebody if you were paying $5 a minute, listen to them blabbering on and on about something that could be true, but more likely is not true. But anyway, it didn't last long.
Missy Hyatt made no money out of it, but she made the company some money out of it, and she made up everything that she said from her own lips that she said that as well. I want to pick up on something you said before we lose track of the point of the Idiot podcast is that it goes on today, and obviously Tony Khan and Dave Meltzer are in some cahoots in some point, and they're friends with he's friends with the Young Bucks and everybody else, and he's getting one side of stories, and he's got a dislike of CM Punk, and CM Punk dislikes him, and here's the point though, is that there are a lot more people out there today doing this wrestling news stuff, and his thing really seems to be that, I don't know, is he creating drama where really there isn't drama? Because I don't know. You're the same as me. We don't listen to other podcasts as we make the damn stuff. We don't need to listen to everybody else unless it involves us somehow. And then, well, who are these other people?
Hey, if they mention me, I'm forced to listen to it.
Oh.
Because I might need to defend myself.
Absolutely. Who are the people who are saying that AEW are going out of business? I mean, of people of relevance. I don't know if Bischoff's ever said it, or Bruce Pritchard, or Conan, or whoever else has got a fairly prominent podcast, such as us. We never said they were going out of business. What we have said is that we're not sure that AEW is going to get the money that they want to get into the black, because they might have as much as $100 million worth of debt, that because they've lost money every single year, including on the game. And Tony Khan also recently came out and said, well, this new deal is going to make us the second most profitable wrestling company of all time. And it's like, well, more than WCW, more than, who else? New Japan and All Japan from the 90s and stuff.
TNA. That was a moneymaker.
It was a money pit. How much did they? Well, we've talked about the original stuff, but
they
didn't. They
didn't really lose money. They didn't make money. They may have made
$80 million in lost on TNA after a few years, weren't they?
Yeah, that's what they say. Who knows? I was inside that office and still didn't know the truth. They wouldn't tell us.
With Dave Meltzer, he's always talking about the bad faith podcasts.
The bad faith podcast.
Yeah, I put it to you that Dave Meltzer's now the ultimate bad faith podcaster.
That's coming from you?
Yeah.
I'm going to call him up and tell him you said that.
Well, I'm sure he'll hear it.
I really am.
But the thing is, I know he's had feuds for years with, Jim Cornette or Eric Bischoff or Bruce Pritchard or whatever.
Okay, what started the feud with, when he was doing Smoky Mountain, Cornette was involved in Smoky Mountain, and I was the commentary guy. He came there one time, and it looked to me like Cornette and Meltzer were doing great. What made them fall out? Anybody know?
Oh, it's probably something about Kenny Omega wrestling blow up dolls or something like that. I think that actually somewhere did kick it off, but now they've been out.
They've been out of sorts for years now, I think.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's their problem. But
it is.
But I mean, ultimately, I'm just sort of thinking, well, Dave Meltzer's now becoming the ultimate bad faith podcaster because he's saying just as outrageous stuff as the pro wrestlers are saying to him, and trying to make it out that it's an us against them mentality kind of thing to, I suggest, get clicks and views and ratings and that kind of, and subscribers, of course. And, just basically pitting him and AEW, which he always, he's always on their side. He's always pitting him.
Always. They could put out a show that I thought was like the shits, the craps, and he would just put it over. It was great. I always thought he looked at wrestling a little differently than I did, and way a lot of people did. It's the story that draws money, not the actual matches. Because you could take two guys and put them in the same match 3 weeks in a row, and your viewership would go down every week, unless you told a story during that match, and a story that had to come to a head. So I could explain it a little better, but matches are only part of a telecast. Matches are only part of actually an event. But if the stories are built in, then now you got something to watch and something to follow.
I'm wondering if Dave Meltzer's been driven crazy because all he seems to do is argue with people on Twitter all day. And I think if you argue with people on Twitter all day, then you're gonna think that that's what everybody thinks. Do you know what I mean?
He blocked me.
Oh, he's not blocked me yet, but
because he was saying something about like Memphis, and it was a horrible territory, and it was this and that. We sold out the Mid-South Coliseum more times than they did Madison Square Garden. Now I know there's a big difference in the size of the buildings, but Mid-South was 11,000. I think the Garden was like 19,000. But look at the difference in population. I mean, they had like 10 or 12 million people just around within 20 miles of the Garden. We had maybe 600,000 within driving distance of the Mid-South Coliseum, but yet we sold it out. And he used to say, oh, they do those cheap angles and they do this and do that. It doesn't matter. What matters is how many people you can put in those seats and continue to put in those seats every week. Now, we didn't have TV deals back in the day. Actually, a lot of times a wrestling promotion had to buy their own TV time. It was like almost an infomercial, and you would plug your shows within that time length. But you didn't get a check every month or every 2 months for $10 or $20 or $50,000. That was non-existent. But anyway, I think Meltzer got a lot of people on his butt because he was talking out of school. And what he's trying to say now is, I don't know how many times I got to tell you people that this is what it's going to be. And I don't think Tony Khan is getting the money that he wants to get because, and Meltzer printed not too long ago, he read an inside article. Did you read that?
Yeah,
inside correspondence?
It wasn't an inside correspondence. That's the thing. It was just something that some guy made up and posted on a Discord.
What is this? What is Discord?
It's just like a chat thing.
Yeah.
All it is like direct messaging kind of thing. And no, I'm sorry. It's a chat room. I'm sorry. But no, it was just something that somebody made up, and it even had the word "guess" with a question mark on it. So it might as well have just said void, void, void. This is not a check. This is just a guess. And he published it in, I think, the Wrestling Observer forum, and then never mentioned it again.
We do know that Dave Meltzer is paying attention to the podcasters, and finally, he hasn't mentioned names, but he's listening to them and it's getting to him. How old is Dave now?
Mid-50s, I think, somewhere
I
around
think
that.
he's a little older than that.
I'll check up on that in a minute then. I want to ask this of you. So we're going to be talking... The reason that he's railing against podcasters such as us or Cornette or whoever it is AEW and the TV rights negotiations. Now, Tony Khan has been boasting about how AEW is going to be getting, a huge bump in money, and we need this huge bump in money, etc., with no actual proof, and it's been going on for months now, to the point it's one running joke. And this is why Dave Meltzer was like, well, you're all going to look stupid when it turns out that there's a huge money deal coming in very, very soon, and you're all going to look... Well, the thing is, the only person who's looked silly is Tony and Dave, for constantly saying we're at the 1 yard line, right, and in the end zone, and any other American football sort of cliches that you want to throw there. Apparently it's going to be announced in the next month, but I want to also bring this to your attention. So indeed...
But wasn't it starting out, they first started talking about it's going to be released in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that was 6 months ago.
Months ago. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's months ago.
Yeah, so everyone's bad faith for hanging around waiting for this announcement that's never coming.
So Meltzer keeps pushing the goal line back.
Absolutely. That's another NFL reference.
Yes, it is. That is.
I like it. That's on point as well. So, do AEW actually deserve this huge raise in pay? Because I'll put it to you, I'll give you a thought of mine, and I'll see what you think about that. Is that indeed, if AEW do get a massive bump in rights fees, Tony Khan would really be getting renewed despite a war of attrition with himself, in a sense, and I'll explain in a second. Pay-per-view buys, on average, are down from last year. Dynamite ratings are down some 30% or more from 2 years ago when CM Punk joined. And that was really the last flourishes of AEW, looking like they'd be in the million viewers a week on AEW Dynamite Club and around that time. And then, of course, and I am also factoring in, by the way, that between 2022 and today, about 2 years, about 8 million households have cut the cord and got rid of cable entirely. But of course, tickets are also just not selling anywhere near as much either. I mean, it's not unheard of to, get 2,000 people or so for a TV taping. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is if AEW gets a huge bump in TV rights, it won't be on the basis of any traditional metrics. It'll be on the basis that AEW have managed to not go out of business, and they're in 2024 where television rights are at an all-time high, and they're just desperate for anyone who can bring in any semblance of the coveted 18 to 49 target demographic. Basically, they're in the right place at the right time, despite not succeeding.
They need to contact Pornhub then. Just put Pornhub on there, and hell, it would go through the roof. But anyway, I think Dave now is, the podcasters are bothering him. I think his own fans are bothering him. Because if you read some of the comments left, if he posts something, about half of them are roasting him themselves. So I think that kind of hurts his little feelings a little bit, and he's not used to that. So, Dave, welcome to the real world.